Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the eMLB Insider Podcast. I'm AnjouPays here, along with my co-host JR. How are you doing today, JR?
Andrew, it's another week by in the eMLB, and we're getting ready to head into the stretch run here.
It is time for some September playoff run baseball. I know I joked in the Discord after the last podcast. You can make a drinking game out of how much I said this is some exciting baseball that's going to happen. Because I definitely said that line quite a bit during our last podcast, but I'm not wrong. This is looking to be some fantastic playoff runs down the stretch. And let's actually, speaking of, let's go ahead and look at where the standings are in the eMLB as we are hitting the first day of September. So 1 month left in the season, plus there's always that one series that leaks into the beginning of October. But we have 1 month of baseball left, essentially. And you can look at this and say that pretty much any playoff spot is up for grabs except maybe AL Central and NL West. But as we go through this, I'm going to make some points here. So AL East, we still have the Baltimore Orioles are trying to gain some leads over the Red Sox and the Rays. They are 5 up on the Red Sox, 6.5 up on the Rays, which is more than they were at this point when we recorded last time. They are leading the eMLB with their record at 79 and 51. AL Central, Detroit Tigers are running away with that division with 76 and 54. Although the Royals have been on a tear recently, they've won 8 out of their last 10, and they have now jumped up to second place in the division, uh, taking over from the Chicago White Sox, who are floundering now about 500 after their poor second half of the season after the All-Star break. AL West is looking very interesting, with only a half game separates the Rangers and the Angels. Astros have slipped a little bit, now down to 8.5 back. So if they don't turn things around quickly, they're going to be out of it pretty soon. And then the two races that I have my eye on, we've got the NL East with the Phillies, Nationals, and Mets all within 3 games of each other, with the Phillies overtaking the Mets. They kind of had opposite sims. Phillies have won 8 out of their last 10. The Mets have lost 7 out of their last 10. And the Nationals just kind of stayed pat at 5-5. So basically, Phillies and Mets switched positions at 1-3, and the Nationals just stayed right there. And then the NL Central, 3 teams within a game and a half of each other with 1 month left of the season, with the Cubs 1 game up on the Cardinals and a game and a half on the Brewers. And then the NL West, we have the Padres 8.5 up on the Diamondbacks, but that is a smaller lead than the last time we simmed. I think the Diamondbacks were 10 back the last time we recorded. And
Yeah.
then wild card races we can start getting more into because now it's about that time. AL wild card, we've got 3 teams that are within 3.5 games of each other, with the Angels, Red Sox, and Rays. Astros are 6 back of the Red Sox, so they still have a chance, but they're, like I said, their time's kind of running out here. And then on the NL side, we've got the two NL Central teams, the Cardinals and Brewers, within a half game of each other. The Nationals 1 game back of that, and then the Mets and Diamondbacks 3.5 back of those. So that is a lot of teams that are still in contention for these playoff spots. Remember, we are not going by the CBA of the real life MLB, which has now expanded to 12 playoff teams. We are still at 10 playoff teams, 5 from each AL and NL. What are your thoughts, JR, as we're looking at these standings going into September?
I think in some of these races where there's multiple teams involved, I think you and I both probably felt like at some point, maybe one of those teams would fall out and would kind of come down to a two-horse race. But, you know, in that AL East you mentioned, Baltimore's putting a little bit of ground, between them and the Rays and the Red Sox. The Rays and Red Sox are actually getting ready to start a 3-game series here to kick off September. So that's good news for the Orioles, and maybe see those two teams beat up on each other a little bit. But
Mm-hmm.
they both have 7 games left here in the month of September against the Orioles. So again, plenty of time for them to catch up. For me, the most exciting part of this is taking a look at the NL East and the NL Central.
Yeah,
To have three
absolutely.
teams in each of those divisions so bunched up together, and we've watched all season long that NL East. You could have flipped a coin on any given week, to see who would be in first place. It feels like, that division has really bounced around. In the Central, I mean, your Cardinals again, were really in control for most of the year, but now the Cubs, have gotten that second wind here in the second half. But even the Brewers, who I personally was counting out a long time ago, especially when they made a couple trades there at the deadline. They traded Keston Hiura and a couple other pieces, and they had even shopped around Nolan Arenado and Christian Yelich, and it looked like Jason Hellman, the GM, was kind of admitting that his team wasn't going to be able to make a run this year. And now here we are, beginning of September, and they're a game and a half back. They're right on the heels of everybody. It's been crazy.
Yeah, and the thing is with that NL Central, like both the Cubs and the Cardinals were giving the other team the opportunity to pull away because they're both in their last 10, they're both 5-5. They're both playing 500 baseball. Neither team could take advantage and try to pull ahead in that race. And then the Milwaukee Brewers just come in, rip off a bunch of wins over the Rockies and the Pirates, which are teams that you should be able to beat. And they're right in this race. And then on going back to the NL East, like I mentioned earlier, the Mets and the Phillies kind of had opposite sims. The Phillies just all of a sudden caught fire and took the place of the Mets, who were on fire and have now gone ice cold. And like you said, like it seems like every sim that there's a different division leader in the NL East. Actually, I'm going to let's look at their graph here. It's probably hard to see on the stream because I don't have it zoomed in on just the division graph. But it's like since the All-Star break, it was the Nationals for most of July, but once you hit August, actually it was the Nationals for all of July. Once you hit August, you see the Mets at the top, the Nationals at the top, Mets, Nationals, now Phillies. And it's just like it's anyone's guess who's going to pull away because no team is playing consistently enough to grab that first place spot and hold it. We have all three of the I'll say this. The Nationals have seemed to be the most consistent team, but they're not consistently winning. They're not going on these long hot streaks or long cold streaks, whereas the Phillies and the Mets seem to flip. Like they'll get really hot for a second, then they'll get really cold for another spell. Nationals are just like content to like, okay, we'll win a little bit more than we're losing, and that's about it.
Yeah, and the thing you see, and we'll I assume we'll probably see this down the stretch here, is when you have teams that are that bunched up that have been bunched up pretty tightly for a while and pretty even. Some little things can really be enough to make a difference. So like for example, in the Central, you and I were talking a little bit earlier before we started recording, but the Cubs, for example, they're down a couple of their starting pitchers now, due to some injuries that have happened over the last couple of weeks. Earlier in August, they lost their starter Alberto Soto, for with an elbow strain. He's out for the year. He had actually been pitching really well in their rotation. And then here, just in the last week or so of sim time, they've lost Braylon Marquez, another member of that rotation. He's going to be out, probably through the end of the regular season. His diagnosis at the time was 4 to 5 weeks. That's probably been about maybe a week or so ago in sim time. So
it's saying here that he's still got 2 to 3 weeks. So he'll be back middle to late September. So he'll be back for like the last couple series, it looks like.
Okay, so he'll be, he could come back at the very end there, but to be down 2/5 of your rotation at the most critical time of the year. I know their offense. We've talked before about how stacked that lineup is, but that's still a tough little hill to overcome. Yeah. When you're coming down the stretch in a tight race.
Absolutely. And one thing I'll point out is what makes this more exciting than a regular playoff race. Normally when we're talking about 3 or 4 teams fighting for a playoff spot, it's because you're talking about the wild card races. In this case, we're talking about 2 different division races with 3 teams each. And the reason why it makes the division races more exciting than if we're talking about wild card races is because all of these teams are going to be playing each other down the stretch. You look into the schedules in September. I was showing them on the screen a little bit ago. I pulled up the Phillies schedule and the Cubs schedule. they all play each other multiple times throughout the month of September. I know the Cubs play both the Cardinals and Brewers for 2 separate series across the month of September. The Phillies, they play the Nationals twice, and I think the Mets once in their series. But because they're all playing each other, it's going to have a direct impact on the playoff races. Normally, when we're talking about wild card, we're talking about teams playing in different divisions that aren't necessarily playing each other, and basically they're doing that whole scoreboard watching thing where they're trying to win a game, but they're also trying to make sure the team that they're chasing is losing a game. In this case, you have a direct impact on how your team's going to end up because you're playing the teams that you're chasing, and that makes it even more exciting than our usual wild card talk.
Yeah, it's really going to be a case, I feel like, where we're going to see teams win these divisions, win these playoff spots, and not, kind of back into them like you've seen in some cases.
Either that, or they might back in if the other 2 teams just start crapping the bed.
That's true. Yeah.
So it'll be because someone has to win a division one way or another. So we'll see what happens, but I think we can both agree that the 2 races we're watching are the NL East and the NL Central, and my stress levels in these next few sims are going to be through the roof. As if they already weren't already.
Fortunately or unfortunately, I don't have as much to worry about.
Well, you do. This is reminding me of the race between the Cardinals and the Reds, our first year back in eMLB 2.0, where we came down to the last day of the season, and what was it, 1 game that separated us between a division win and a
1 game. Yeah, I dropped a game, I think, to Cody's Pirates that did me in.
Yeah, and neither of us were at a high enough record to make a playoff spot, so it was going to be division or bust for us, and I squeaked it out. And the funny thing is, I think that's my worst winning percentage ever since I started. So, but anyway, this is even more exciting because now it's between 3 teams in 2 different divisions. 3 different divisions if you count the AL East. 4 if the Houston Astros can get back in it, but at this point they're kind of on the outside looking in. They still technically have a chance in the AL West, but I think they're more likely trying to fight for a wild card spot at this point.
Yeah, I would have a hard time seeing them get close to the division at that point, especially the way the Rangers and Angels have been playing.
Yeah. So, since we are talking about moving into September, that means that we have ended the month of August. And as a result, we have players of the month that we would like to discuss. So, are they under minor awards? Yes, they're under minor awards. So, what award would you like to talk about first? You choose, JR.
So, I think let's go, AL Hitter of the Month, which actually happens to also be the AL Rookie of the Month.
Okay, so we'll kill 2 birds with 1 stone off the bat. Let's do it.
Right off the bat. Let's go. He's the big winner, so we'll start with the big winner, and that's Lucas Parker from the Kansas City Royals. He's been all year. He's been a good tandem there with Andrew Vaughn as kind of the first base DH combo there. He had a big month for the Royals as they really played a great month of baseball. They went 18-11. Like you mentioned earlier, they moved into second place. Not contending for the division, obviously, the way the Tigers have been, but good story there for Minerva and his Royals. But yeah, Lucas Parker, AL Hitter of the Month and Rookie of the Month. What a outstanding month for that kid.
Yeah, and you have to think that Lucas Parker might have made Minerva think a little bit about moving Andrew Vaughn at the deadline because they both play the same position. But with one at first and one at DH, you have a formidable duo there for sure.
Yeah.
And Lucas Parker is making a strong case for Rookie of the Year with the way he's playing. He's hitting .311 for the entire year with 28 home runs, 98 RBIs. He's already almost at 100 RBIs, and we haven't even hit September, or we're just now hitting September. So he is definitely playing some great baseball down in Kansas City. A lot of young talent in Kansas City that are gonna put some. We might need to be watching them next season to contend. Some people talked about them as a sleeper candidate for this year, but injuries kind of derailed that early on. But they're definitely looking good lately, and we'll see if Minerva can make some moves to put them into contention territory next year. So let's talk about the NL Hitter of the Month. And that is Washington Nationals' Jose Anthony. And he went, for the month, .394 with 11 home runs, 22 RBIs, and 20 runs scored. And he is at a 3.42 average for the season with 33 home runs and 89 RBIs. I'll be honest, these numbers look like Juan Soto numbers. It looks like this is where the production of Juan Soto went, was to Jose Anthony.
Yeah, I mean, Anthony, last year he was the rookie of the year. He came on the scene, and really big time step forward and to give that Washington lineup another boost. And man, to your point, he has looked, MVP like this year. He probably right now is the favorite for the MVP award in the NL.
Yeah, because if you look at his numbers, he put up the Rookie of the Year last year with 31 home runs, a 3.28 average, and 108 RBIs. He's passed that number in home runs already, and we still have a month to play. He is on track to beat his RBI numbers, and he's almost 20 points higher in batting average. Like, what is the sophomore slump for this guy? It doesn't exist.
Yeah, it does not exist at all. So, I can only see, him, really continuing to raise his game. And, it's that Washington lineup is pretty scary for not just today, but for the future.
Absolutely. Now, if only you have to imagine if Soto was playing up to how he'd been playing, we wouldn't even be talking about a race in the NL East. You have to imagine that the Nationals would have pulled way far. Well, maybe not way far ahead because their bullpen is one of their weak points. But you'd have to think that if Soto was playing at the same level Anthony and Mark Diggs is playing, that they wouldn't be stuck in the middle of this mess that's the NL East. They would have at least a little bit of a lead right now.
Yeah.
All right, well, we talked about the AL Rookie of the Month because it combined with the Hitter of the Month. So let's talk about the NL Rookie of the Month. And you've heard me complain about him too much because he was literally just drafted a couple months ago, and he's already posted a Rookie of the Month award, and that is Danny Smith Jr. of the Chicago Cubs. For the month of August, he hit 382 with 9 home runs and 20 RBIs. For the season, in 119 at-bats, he is now hitting 395 with 11 home runs and 22 RBIs. This man is a prodigy. Let's just plain and simple. This is probably one of the best, if not the best, baseball prospect to ever come into Major League Baseball, jumping straight to the major leagues out of being drafted at age 19, already putting up MVP type numbers. It's just, to fall into the laps of the Cubs at 4 is a miracle. And you have to think that they are extremely excited that he's not playing on the north side of Chicago.
Yeah, to have a kid hit nearly 400 in his first month of Major League ball, first month of professional ball at the Major League level is just amazing. I'm like you, we're going to be complaining about this guy for years to come in our division. But yeah, it's exactly what the Cubs needed. And, obviously they're going to be hoping he can put up similar numbers in his second month of big league action in September to try to guide them to a division title.
Yeah, they're going to, like you mentioned earlier, they had a couple of injuries to key pitchers, so you have to think they need their offense to step up to kind of balance that out. But I don't think we're going to talk a little bit later about a player in your organization that will offset that a little bit, you hope.
Yeah, I may be biased, but we have a strong prospect coming up who could be a good opponent for A. Smith for the next few years.
I may not have. My center fielder is no slouch himself, so you might think that like the NL Central might have like a collection of some of the best center fielders in baseball. Adele is not going to be up there with Danny Smith Jr. by far, but I got Ronald Acuna right now, so that helps a little bit.
Right, exactly.
You think across baseball, you have like the star center fielders. You have Sammy Ayla for Houston. You have Danny Smith. You have your prospect. I'm not going to name the name, but we'll talk about them in a minute. Mike Trout. So I guess the AL West might contend for best group of center field talent. So AL West and NL Central might be fighting for that, but we'll see. So Once again, Danny Smith Jr., Rookie of the Month. Congratulations to him. He's going to be a thorn in my side for years to come. All right, Pitchers of the Month. Since we just did NL, let's switch over to AL. So Pitcher of the Month for The AL is none other than the nutball, Jim Reed, over in Baltimore. One of the main reasons why Baltimore has been on this hot streak. He posted a 4-1 record with a minuscule 1.63 ERA for the month of August, with 26 strikeouts over 38 and 2/3 innings. And for the season, he is 14-3 with a 2.01 ERA. Ethan Knight, who? Because it's Jim Reed's ball game now.
Yeah, you never would have thought that Baltimore would actually have another starting pitcher come along that could challenge Ethan Knight for the ace spot in that rotation. But Jim Reed has been incredible all season long. Again, could be the favorite there for the AL Cy Young Award at this point. Heading into the final month of the season, and his teammate might be his toughest competition, and Ethan Knight. So, that's been a big part of the Orioles' surge in the second half. Those guys really stepping up and just being, pretty unbeatable. Really, I mean, again, we talk a lot about how pitcher win-loss records, aren't the most important thing in the world, and 14-3 leading the way for the team with the best record in baseball. That's no fluke.
And when you have two pitchers on the same team that are the leading candidates for Cy Young, that is going to be rough to come up against come playoff time when you have those shortened series and smaller rotations. Like that's only you're gonna see them twice in a 7-game series for sure, if not a third time for one of them. And that's going to be some scary competition to come up against. So teams be ready, because these two, the Knight and Reed combination, is the best 1-2 punch in baseball. There's no question. I don't even want to see this on Here's Why You're Wrong. That's not even a debate. Those are the best 1-2 rotation in baseball. Don't even argue it. And then at least something good is happening for the Cardinals. The top pitcher for the NL in the month of August, balancing out my horrible move of trading for Jonathan Stever, is Jeremy Frank, the independent league sensation that is taking the eMLB by storm as a pitcher. If it wasn't for the great bats of players like Kent Hrbek and Antonio Alvarez vying for Rookie of the Year on the batting side, you could give Frank a very good consideration for Rookie of the Year in NL. As for the month of August, he posted a 5-1 record with an ERA of 2.56, holding batters to a 2.33 average, striking out 49. For the season, he is 16-4. He's leading the NL in wins. He is second in the NL in ERA behind the Mets' Escalona, and he is just pitched well beyond the expectations. He's quietly played really well. He doesn't have the fanfare of someone like Danny Smith Jr., because we all knew Danny Smith coming into the draft, and someone like Jandy Ronson, who's also now already in the majors. But Jeremy Frank never pitched in the minor leagues, made the jump directly to the major leagues, and is putting up potential Cy Young Award numbers.
Yeah. Again, he could easily be, in my opinion, if I had to vote right now, you had to vote for the Cy Young right now, he'd get my vote in the National League. And again, very strong contender for Rookie of the Year. I mean, that would be a heck of a double feature to pull off, getting both of those awards. Again, maybe the Rookie of the Year is a little more of a long shot just based on some of the competition, but
which is hilarious to think, because you're talking about, okay, you were just named the best pitcher in the entire National League, but you're not going to be the Rookie of the Year in the National League. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, potentially. I mean, for me, it's either him or Kent Hrbek that's the Rookie of the Year. But again, just going back to his performance in August again. Keep in mind, with what he's doing, with what Jim Reed has been doing, these are happening in the midst of a playoff race.
Yeah.
These are happening with the season on the line, and you're talking about Jeremy Frank, a rookie who is now, easily the top of that Cardinals rotation.
Yep.
With the way some of the other guys like Flaherty and Hudson and those guys have pitched. So there's been no easing him in. I mean, he has jumped right in and been the top dog in that rotation. at a time when St. Louis needs it most.
Yeah.
So he's really, really come through there.
Yeah, and for whatever reason, Flaherty just seems to run out of gas at the end of the season. I don't for people that weren't part of the league last year, Flaherty just absolutely looked like a single A ball player in the month of September for the Cardinals last year, and it almost destroyed their chances of making the playoffs. In fact, I started Dakota Hudson in the wildcard game because I didn't trust how Flaherty had been performing in the month of September. He gave up astronomical amounts of runs, and he's starting to look like that again. He's lost a couple of his last few starts, but thank goodness for players like Jeremy Frank, Tanner Burns, Dakota Hudson, and the rookie call-up Mark Jones, who has actually got technically right now a better ERA in the majors than Frank, even though he's pitched way fewer innings. Thank goodness for them locking it down, because Flaherty keeps scaring me when we get to the end of the season. I hope he figures it out for September this year, because man, and we need, like you said, we need it because our hitting ain't getting it done. But thankfully, I've got a lockdown bullpen that's helping out, and when we get into trouble. But again, congratulations to all of our award winners, the hitters, the pitchers, and the rookies of the month for the National and the American League. So moving on to our next topic, we've already discussed it. It is September, and with September means roster expansion. This is the time for teams that are out of the playoff race to start getting a look at some of their young prospects that might get some playing time in the majors, to see what they have in plans for next year, or for teams that are in the playoff race to get some reinforcements to help out with underperforming players or injuries. And we got a handful of insight into which players are going to be called up. We didn't get a list of everything because those moves have all not been announced yet. We got some rumors we got some quotes from GMs. We got some team announcements that have already happened in the Discord that we're going to discuss. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about teams that might be on the outside looking in when it comes to playoff time. We're going to look at what prospects they're bringing up to potential and see if they are players that maybe fit into the future plans of these teams. And then we're going to look at the teams that are in the playoff race, trying to call up some players to have an impact and help them make that playoff push. So first up, the Braves announced that they are calling up pitcher Gabriel Rodriguez from the minor leagues. And at the same time, this isn't a call-up, but a significant move. They are activating pitcher Max Fried from the injured list. Unfortunately, at this point, it may be too little too late for the Braves, because they are sitting pretty far back in the standings right now. They are currently 13.5 back of the leading Phillies, well under 500. So this is more like, hey, let's see what you can do in preparation for next year. Fried was definitely a disappointing loss to them early on in the season. So it'll be good to see if he can start getting back to his form in preparation for next year. But let's look at, what was it, Rodriguez, I said?
Yeah,
Gabriel Rodriguez. I need to look at these players again. So he's a reliever. So he's not one of these top starting pitching prospects that you see like in Justin Gibbs, Gene Hughes, Sam Sauceda, Gomer Townsend. Those are the big prospect names that you would think might make the crack at this roster to see what they can do before next season. But no, it's a reliever in Gabriel Rodriguez. What's your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think what's interesting here, we saw the Braves at the deadline kind of, move some of their veteran relievers, Luke Jackson, AJ Mentor, for some younger prospects. And as Aiden has talked about, he's looking at it as a reload and not a rebuild. So, as you look at the back end of your bullpen, you got to figure out, all right, who's going to pick up the slack for that? And Rodriguez is a guy who, has had success, as a closer in the minor leagues and could be looked at as a setup or closer guy in the bigs. He throws hard, throws close to 100 miles an hour, kind of sits in that 97 to 99 range, has a great fastball and curveball combo, which, as a late inning reliever, if you've got two, big plus pitches like that, that's really kind of all you need. He's got a change up that is kind of below average. So, he probably isn't going to use that very often, but it'll be interesting to see. He could be a guy that, slots you in with a relatively young closer at the back end, knowing that you've got, some talented young arms that can start. So, this could be a chance to audition for that for a month.
Yeah, but you have to think the downside with Rodriguez is his control. He is pretty
Mhm.
wild when it comes to giving up the walks. You can compare him to a Wild Thing. uh, so far, he has already racked up 21 and a third innings at the majors this year, but that was earlier this season. He did walk almost 7 batters per 9, and it doesn't. If you're giving up that many base runners, it's going to be hard to keep your ERA down, as his FIP is much higher than his ERA at the majors. But he pitched lights out when he was at AAA to the tune of a .59 ERA. So he didn't walk as many batters there, but he overcame the walks that he did give up. So he's got that whole like fireball, I'm going to strike you out mentality, but I don't necessarily know where it's going to go. So I might give up a few walks along the way. So he's got some potential, but if he's going to succeed at the major league level, he's at least got to cut down on walks a little bit. I'm not saying he has to become like never walk anybody, but he definitely can't be giving up 7 walks per 9 innings if he's going to if he's going to stay in the majors.
Yeah, that's not a recipe for success in a tight ball game.
No, not really. All right, moving on. Next team, we have the Kansas City Royals have announced they are calling up pitcher Caden Lemons and outfielder Cody Masters to the majors. Now, the Royals kind of have a crowded outfield now because at the trade deadline, they added Antonio Cabello from the Cardinals, and he slotted in pretty quickly. And now they're adding another outfielder to that in Cody Masters, as well as the pitcher Lemons. So I'm pulling them up here, but do you have any initial thoughts while I'm pulling up these players for the viewers to see?
Yeah, Lemons. I was a little more intrigued with, as a prospect to take a look at. He doesn't have great numbers coming out of Omaha. He's in 40 games has kind of a 4.5 ERA, 11 saves. It looks like he's a guy that is probably going to get some time in middle relief. Maybe you could see him, get some shots, a more high leverage situation if he performs well. The interesting part is that if not for the depth that Kansas City has in its young starting pitching, I mean, he's a guy that could potentially be a back end of a rotation starter. He's got the stamina for it. He's got a pretty good fastball, slider. Changeup again. Needs some work if he was going to be a starter. To get that third pitch. But on another organization, he might be a guy that would get an audition not in the bullpen, but as a back end starter during this final month.
Yes, but to your point, he's got 2+ pitches, which is a mark of an effective reliever. With that third pitch, kind of like right now. I mean, it has potential. According to OSA, it actually has the potential to be his best pitch, but that is still in development, and we don't know how that's going to develop over time. So right now, it makes sense for him to be a reliever. And as you mentioned, they already have a lot of good young pitching in the starting rotation, including players that are going to be coming back from injury either late this season or next year. I mean, just looking at Cal Maduro, he looks to be a superstar in the making, and he's only made 3 appearances at the majors so far. So they've got a lot of good young pitching at Kansas City, as well as the veterans to give them that wisdom in Evaldi and Hendricks. So I'm interested to see why they didn't give Maduro another shot, since they've already had him perform at the majors this year. Maybe see what he can do at the end of this season to see where he would slot in next year. But I guess they're focusing on giving Caden some time at the majors. Well, let's talk about their the outfielder though that they're going to call up. That is Cody Masters. This guy is a defensive dynamo in the outfield. I'd say about average with the bat, but he's got excellent defense to go around the outfield and all 3 outfield positions, which is great when you're looking at someone to fill a bench role as a backup outfielder.
Yeah, he's got all the hallmarks of a really, really strong, really valuable 4th outfielder. Switch hitter. Again, can play all 4 positions. Seems like a pretty solid across the board guy. Other than his defense, I don't know that there's any one aspect of his game that really would stand out as a plus or anything along those lines. Just kind of like your typical solid across the board tools guy. Who can hit a little bit for power. Gets on base. Can probably steal you a bag or two. Again, can play really good defense in the corner outfield spots, and pretty solid defense up the middle and center as well. So
Hmm.
as you look ahead again, when you're a team like Kansas City looking ahead to next year, if this could be a strong fourth outfielder spot starter for you, as a young outfielder, that gives you one fewer spot that you're looking at trying to fill this offseason.
Absolutely. And his numbers at AAA were very impressive. In across 39 games, he was batting his slash line with average on base and slugging was 322, 387, and 503 for an OPS of 890 and a 1.9 WAR. That is pretty impressive across when you're almost at a 2 WAR across 39 games. So he may have not had that production at the majors because he's had plenty of at bats at the majors this season. He's just getting called back up. But I mean, it's one of those players like, what much more do you have to prove at the AAA level? Let's see if you can put it together at the major league level.
Yeah.
So we'll see how those guys do in Kansas City. But the big team that is out of a playoff race that are calling up two of the most highly touted prospects in their organization is my co-host Cincinnati Reds. Calling up, and this has not been revealed yet, so this is where you're going to hear it first, unless he posts in a Discord ahead of time. I don't know. Are you going to let the podcast break the news?
Podcast break the news.
All
yeah,
right.
absolutely.
Would you like to do the honor since this is your team? Would you like to make the GM here? We'll act as if this is a press conference and I'm the reporter. Have the Reds decided who they're going to bring up to the expanded roster, the 28-man roster?
Yes, Mr. Post Dispatch. We're really happy that we're finally going to get to see the debut of Trey Griffey in the outfield for the Reds here coming up. Again, really excited to see what he can do at the major league level. Gonna get some starts mostly at center field. He also can play right field pretty well, but center field is really the spot where I'm looking for him to really take hold. He's been a pretty consistent top 10 prospect in the eMLB for the last year and a half, and it's time for him to get a look and hopefully set the stage for a first full season next year.
So, a reporter asking a follow-up question: why didn't he get the call up sooner? He is hitting 345. On base 428, slugging 591 for an OPS of 1.019 in AAA this year. Over only 78 games. Why didn't he not get the call sooner?
Quite frankly, the outfield with the Reds is pretty crowded, and there was a little bit of a roster crunch that I really didn't want to have to send a guy like Juan PA down. And also, Lamar Sparks right now, he's essentially the only right-handed hitting outfielder that I have up on the team. All of my other outfielders are all left-handed batters. So I didn't want to have a spot where I had all left-handers in the outfield. I tried to make some moves at the deadline that might have freed up a spot for Trey to get him up here earlier, but just didn't happen. So I wanted to keep giving some at-bats to Juan PA. But now, I think it's time, now that we've got the extra couple roster spots, bring him up here. He actually is coming off here in the month of August. He was the International League Batter of the Month, so I think he was trying to make sure that I knew it was time.
It's like, notice me. I'm here. I'm ready. Get me up there. And this is the player I was alluding to earlier when we were joking about how the Central has a lot of good center fielders. This is the future of center field for the Cincinnati Reds in Trey Griffey. I would say he's like a Danny Jr. He's got the same type of skill set and play style as Danny Smith Jr., but he's like a step or maybe even a half a step below where Danny Smith is at all of those levels. He is definitely going to be an outstanding player, a perennial all-star in my opinion, and it's exciting to see him get his first taste of the majors here. But Griffey is not the only guy you're bringing up. Who else are you bringing?
Yeah, so, again, and the funny thing is both of these guys are CCPs, so again, their ceiling may not quite be established as of yet. So that has us in Cincinnati pretty excited. But the other guy we're calling up is going to be Forrest Heitert, the community creative player, the former one of our former GMs who was a GM of the Angels and the Padres. He's still around here a little bit. So hi, Forrest. I'll be sure to let you know so you can check your guy out. But he's somebody that I'm really excited to have in the catching spot. He's got a big bat. He's got a really good arm and skills behind the plate that I think are only going to get better, and I think has a chance to really give us kind of some plus offense, from that position, while also having some small ratings at a lot of other positions around the diamond. If we need to move him, just some infield or outfield spots in a pinch or in an emergency situation. So that's going to have some value too.
Well, you have to think, though, that there's really not going to be another player you would want to put at catcher where you move Forrest to somewhere else. I would think his catching ability. Yeah. I mean, I don't think you would want to move him somewhere else. I mean, it's nice that he has that ability, but his ability at catcher is probably too good to pass up. I don't think you're going to put anyone else behind the plate. He kind of reminds me with his skill set. He kind of. I'll do a major league comparison to Pudge Rodriguez, someone with a strong arm and some pop in his bat. This guy could also be a potential perennial all-star. There's a lot of high-quality, specifically CCP catchers that are coming up through the major leagues because I think GMs all creating their players recognize that catcher was the most thin position, and that's why a lot of these CCPs coming up are catchers. Like you've got Forrest Heitert here. You've got Aiden Pearson over in Atlanta. You've got what's the player in Houston? There's one in Houston. There's let me just look at the prospect list because I think 5 out of the top 10 are catchers.
Yeah,
Grayson Rowan from Houston. Lola Thurman in Texas. Aiden Pearson for Atlanta. And then Forrest for the Reds and Hamilton Porter for the Rays. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in the top 26. 3 of those are in the top 5. And all of them are CCPs. These are literally all CCP players. And it's because the GMs were like, where is my biggest need? And a lot of the teams said catcher. And we are beginning to see a wave of young CCPs. Hamilton Porter is already in the majors. Grayson Rowan is already in the majors. Pearson has made an appearance at the majors, and Lola Thurman can't be too far behind. These catchers are about to take the league by storm, and I'm a little jealous. Not gonna lie. So, but yeah, that's the Reds. The big news: they are calling up 2 of. They're your top 2 prospects, correct? If I remember.
Yeah, they're my top 2 prospects. 2 of the top 25 prospects in the eMLB. So, looking forward to seeing what those guys can do as we start to look ahead to 26.
And your number 3 prospect has already been in the majors in Orelvis Martinez. So, the youth movement is here in Cincinnati for sure.
That's right.
All right, moving on to our playoff contending teams. First up, we've got Tampa Bay Rays calling up outfielder Alex Murray to the majors for this roster expansion. That's their major league team. He's at AAA right now. There he is. So Alex Murray. There is one word that comes to mind when we're talking about Alex Murray. Can you guess what that word is?
I have a need. A need for speed.
Okay, you pulled the whole phrase on me. That's even better than what I was thinking. So, yes. An OSA rating out of a possible 20. A 20 speed, 20 stealing, and 20 base running. Like, literally, can we just name him Lightning McQueen? Can that just be his nickname? I am speed. Because that's literally all Alex Murray is. Have this guy on, his bat is, he reminds me a lot of Billy Hamilton, someone with a lot of speed, but that's not necessarily the best bat, and also plus defense. If he can figure out how to hit the ball, this guy's going to be dangerous at the top of a lineup. But right now, his bat is not quite there. His speed is definitely helping him get on base. And when he does, he's already, through 2025, through both AA and AAA, he's got 63 stolen bases. Good Lord. So when he gets on, he's going to be running. This player might like contend for a Ricky Henderson type of stolen base records. But he's got to get on base first. That's the big issue here.
Yeah, and I think the what you see in today's baseball, and obviously the American League has always had the DH going back a long way, but when you have the DH, if you have a guy like this who can play tremendous defense, can give you a lot of speed and a spark, from in the lineup, you can handle that his bat isn't going to be the greatest in the world. He's going to give you a ton of value, when he's on the bases, knowing that every walk is a double, every single is a double, every double could be a triple.
Yep.
And knowing that in the field, he covers so much ground in center field to give your team a lot of value. So at that point, anything he gives you with the bat is a plus.
Absolutely.
So whether you view him as okay, he's going to try to be a leadoff hitter and maybe be a spark plug there, or you put him down in the lineup maybe at the 9 spot as kind of like that. Some managers call it kind of the quote unquote second leadoff guy, from that spot in the order. I think he can still give tremendous value to a team like Tampa Bay that has a lot of sluggers, that are in the middle of their order, and can deal with a guy with some speed that's going to help them out in defense and center field.
Absolutely. And I do have a direct quote from an interview with the GM Charles of the Tampa Bay Rays. He has stated that Alex Murray will be splitting time with Patino in center field and will be hitting in the number 9 spot. So at the jump, he is not going to be in the leadoff spot. I think, honestly, the 9 spot is a very valuable spot. That's somewhere where you put someone who has contact ability and speed, but not necessarily enough on-base percentage to be at the top of the lineup. And that's I kind of think that's where Alex Murray fits where he is right now. He could develop that bat and get on base more in the future, but for where he is right now, I think that makes sense.
Yeah, and you're talking about a team that, has a guy like Jared Kelenic, leading off at this point. You would love to get a guy like that and have him, be able to get some RBI opportunities for that.
Yeah.
Or, once they get Fritz Flaherty back, Flaherty obviously spent the majority of the year in that leadoff spot. So once you get him back, giving him RBI opportunities. So, either way, that, like you said, that 9 spot in the order is pretty valuable.
Absolutely. So we'll see how Alex Murray does in his first stint in the major leagues. This will be his major league debut in Tampa Bay. Next up, we've got the New York Mets, who are a team that we mentioned earlier a little bit on a slide recently, but they are bringing up a high potential prospect that could make an impact going down the stretch, and that is shortstop, second baseman Roncel Villaman. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Someone who is definitely a plus defender, plays second base a little bit better than shortstop. So the word from Denbrew, the GM of the Mets, is that he's going to slide into more of a second base role as opposed to a shortstop role. And someone who has a very good walk rate, someone who can hit for a little bit of power, a little bit of contact, may get up there in the strikeouts a little bit, but this is someone who's got the potential to be a mainstay in the middle infield for the Mets in the future.
Yeah, I mean, he's I think he's maybe the number 69 prospect in the eMLB. So, talking a top 100 prospect. They've got Guillaume there, but again, he's been hobbled a little bit with injury. So, this gives them somebody that can kind of fill in there at second a little bit while he recovers. And again, also, look ahead to next season. This could be a kid that they're penciling in as one of their next wave of the future type of guys that is going to take over a pretty important spot. Guillaume is a free agent after this year, so that's a spot where they're obviously wanting not just to finish competing for the division title. I mean, obviously that's important too, but again, you're always looking ahead, whether you're no matter what position you're in, you're always looking ahead as well. You have to do that as a GM. And so this is a good opportunity to do that.
Talk about pressure for a young player, though. This is going to be his first stint in the majors. You're going to be jumping in right into the middle of a playoff race. You're going to be thrust into a starting second base role because right now Guillaume is dealing with some knee inflammation, so they have a hole to fill there. Not only that, you have the GM quoted as saying that this is the opportunity for Veerman to show what he can do and potentially have an impact on whether or not they re-sign Guillaume. So that's a lot of pressure to put on a guy who's making his major league debut, middle of a playoff race, filling in for a starter, and potentially saying that starter might not be on the team next year, depending on how well he plays. That's that's a lot for a young kid to handle. But we'll see. We'll see if Ransell is up to the task. They're going to be sliding Minwoo Park over to shortstop as a result. So we'll see how that impacts the Mets down the stretch. So that'll be definitely be interesting to watch. Next up, we've got Detroit Tigers, the leaders in the AL Central. They are calling up a player that's looking to give a roundhouse kick to the entire league, Mr. Chuck Norris in center field. Now, is this a move that you think Detroit is looking to? Do you think that Chuck Norris is going to be a player that you'll see on the playoff roster? Or is this kind of like, let's see what he can do to prepare for next season, even though because we've already got the division pretty well in hand, we can just do a little bit of experimentation here and see how this goes. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's just a little bit more of kind of, hey, we have some space here in the division. We're going to win this thing. Let's use this opportunity here in September to try to give him a chance to get maybe some at bats here and there. Give yourself a chance to give your starters a little bit of a rest here and there, and kind of kill two birds with one stone that way. Just to see how close is Chuck Norris to being ready to be in the majors on a full-time basis. Give him a chance to kind of be around some veterans. That can always help out with those guys. Maybe some of that rubs off, so that even if he does start next season back in the minor leagues, which probably more likely than not, that gives him like, okay, this was your taste of the bigs. Now do your best to get back here at some point next season.
Yeah, and a couple other guys that Detroit mentioned that they added right before this point so that they would be playoff eligible before hitting September, and that would be Felix Matthews and Hank Peralta. Unfortunately, Hank Peralta just went down with an injury, but he is only going to be out for a week. So Detroit's GM has informed me that they are going to stick with a 27-player roster, even with Hank Peralta injured, as opposed to calling up someone else. So they are trying to keep the core of their team together to get ready for a playoff run. So I thought that was interesting. They're not even going to go up to 28 players. So we'll see how that impacts the playoffs.
Yeah, that's an interesting spot because, again, I think we all kind of expected Peralta to come back up if he hadn't been hurt and maybe get back in there. But again, Mark knows what he's doing. He's got a good team in place there heading for the postseason. So we'll see how that goes. I'd still like to take advantage of the extra roster spot if that were me, but we'll see how that works out.
Yeah, it's interesting. They're not only are they only running 27 players, they're only running a 12-man pitching staff. Currently, wow. They're about to have 15 players on the bench for bats, but only 12 in their pitching staff. You think pitching fatigue might come into play by the time we get to the playoffs?
I would definitely, that's a spot where if you have that extra place on the roster to get a pitcher in there, just again for down the stretch to give the guys a chance to get some rest in, so you're not wearing them out. Again, you're 10 games up in the division at this point. You've got some cushion there to play with. Make sure you can get your rotation set the way you want it to as you get toward the end of September and head into the playoffs. So, yeah. Maybe it's something he'll change his mind as the month goes along here in the next week or two, and we'll bring up another arm to take that spot. But that's certainly something I would do.
Yeah, and I think like with the spot Detroit is in, it's not like they are in a middle of a battle where bringing up a pitcher that doesn't have a lot of major league experience could potentially ruin a playoff push for you. You're 10 and a half games up on your division rival in second place. So this would be a great time to bring up someone who doesn't have that experience, help give some of your other guys some time off, and prepare and get those arms rested for the playoffs, because at this point you're almost a guaranteed shot. You're almost guaranteed in for the playoffs. Go ahead and give some of your guys some rest and prepare for the playoffs. So, but we'll see what Detroit does, if they heed our advice, or if they're going to stick to their guns. As they mentioned to me, they're only running a 27-man roster. So we'll see how that goes. And then last but not least, we're not going to talk about a player that's being called up. We're going to talk about a player that is not being called up in the middle of a playoff race that could have had a positive impact, and that is for the Los Angeles Angels. So their GM has informed me that their call-ups are two kind of just role players in second baseman Sam Bianco and pitcher Colin Snyder. So looking at Bianco real quick, he's got some good potential. He is not a top prospect. He's got decent speed, decent base running, a bat that isn't going to hit for a lot of power, but he can get on base at a pretty good clip. Got a good leadership capabilities, so he could definitely make an impact on that lineup. And then looking at, what was the other player? Colin Snyder, potential another. You and I talked about this many times before. The GM of the Angels loves their bullpen pieces, and they're bringing up another one in Colin Snyder with a plus fastball slider combination, pitching pretty darn well in AAA. Has, how many saves does he have? He has 24 saves this season with a 3.05 ERA. Which those guys are definitely nothing to sneeze at in terms of the potential value they could add to the Angels down the stretch. But there's a player in this lineup that is noticeably missing. Can you name that player that is noticeably missing from this lineup?
That would be...
I'm fishing for an answer here.
That would be... I'm about to reel it in. That's Mike Trout.
That is Mike Trout. He is still on the injured list. A gaping hole in center field. Right now, Sammy Ciani is playing there in center field. He is playing at replacement level for the season. He is like literally a 0 WAR. A below average in terms of OPS plus and runs created. He's got good defense, so he's holding his own defensively out there. But he is nowhere near the production of Mike Trout. As I'm trying to pull up his injury information, he is currently going to be out for another 1 to 2 weeks. The player in question that people are going to wonder why they didn't call up to give a chance to fill that void in center field is Barry Allen, one of the top outfield prospects. He's actually ranked number 12 in the overall prospect rankings, sitting right there in AAA. Has a he's hitting 289 in 23 games for AAA. He was recently called up from AA. Another speed guy like we saw in Alex Murray, but this guy has a better bat than Alex Murray by far. And he's got that defense capability where, like, if you're going to replace Ciani in center field, this guy's more than capable of doing so. Why do you think the Angels did not move to bring up Allen? And I'm asking you because I know the reason. I have a direct quote from the GM as to the reasoning. I just want to hear what you think first. Let's give your speculation.
Yeah, that was one. I guess I can see why maybe they wouldn't want to bring him up there to kind of be in that spot in the middle of a playoff chase. I mean, he did just get to AAA not too long ago. He's played 20 some games in AAA. Obviously he's got a high potential. He's got the potential to have a really good bat to go along with his speed, but that's still developing. So maybe he's of the mind that he just didn't want to bring him up too soon and rush him. Wanted to make sure he was ready. Didn't want him to be a flash in the pan or anything like that.
Yeah. That's some fairly good reasoning. It's actually fairly close to the quote that I have from the Los Angeles GM. And his reasoning specifically is that, yes, Trout is still injured, but as you mentioned, he is doesn't have very much experience at the AAA level yet. So he said, I want to see improvement at the AAA level. And I don't want to call him up just to see him not get playing time when Trout comes back from injury. So while Trout may be out for another potentially 2 weeks, once he comes back, where does Allen fit in? With that outfield, nowhere. So the GM of the Angels, direct quote, is of the mind that when you call up a prospect of Barry Allen's caliber, a number 12 prospect, you want to call him up for good. You don't want to call him up to play a bench. You don't want to call him up to have platoon. You don't want to call him up for the purposes of just sending him right back down again when the player he's playing for is back from injury. When he calls up Allen, he wants Allen to fill that starting role right away with the level of talent that Allen has as the number 12 overall prospect. And I honestly agree with that sentiment. That's kind of what I'm doing with the Cardinals. I wrote an article about the Cardinals not calling up 5 batters that could potentially have an impact on the Cardinals offense, because that's where we're struggling. And the main reason why is because I don't really have a specific spot where those guys can get consistent playing time, because when I call them up, I want them to be in that role. Player like Benny the Jet Rodriguez does not, he plays first base and third base, but those are both locked up by Evan White and Anthony Rendon. With Barry Allen being called up to the majors, as soon as Trout comes back from injury, Allen is either a bench role with inconsistent at-bats, or he's sent back down to AAA. So why not just keep him in AAA, keep those at-bats going, develop that talent, because he's still only 21 years old, and see what you can get down the line when he is ready to make that jump. And I agree with this take, especially since right now, it's not like the Angels are on a slide. They are playing some really good baseball right now. I don't think you really need to move Barry Allen and potentially mess with that. Keep maintaining what you're doing right now. Trout gets back, gives you that extra jolt as you get into the rest of September.
Yeah, no reason to mess with the chemistry at this point, the way that team's playing.
Absolutely. All right, well, that wraps up all of the information that we know as of now. So keep in mind that all the other teams across the eMLB are going to be making roster adjustment moves. These are just the ones that we've either heard about through team announcements or have given us a little bit of an inside scoop. So we will see next time what other prospects have hit the majors. Maybe we'll see another Barry Bonds Jr. sighting. I don't know. Another elite center fielder in the NL Central. So we'll see what happens down the stretch. These guys could have potential playoff impacts as well, so it'll be interesting to see. All right, JR, it's time. It is time for the power rankings, and this week we do have the how teams moved up or down, and we're actually going to start this off as I switch my screens here. We're going to start this off with what teams fell out of our top 10. And for me, I had one team drop out of the top 10, and that is, I'm going to pull up, well, actually, I can't, why am I pulling up? You guys can't see it anymore. That is the New York Mets. The Mets had a big slide over the past 2 weeks, which is how much time has passed since our last power rankings. They lost. They played 4 series. They played Arizona, San Francisco, St. Louis, Philadelphia. They lost all 4 of those series. They are in a really rough stretch right now, especially losing 2 out of 3 to the Phillies, where now the Phillies have taken the top spot in the NL East, and now the Mets have dropped down the 3rd. I think this one was pretty easy considering the Mets were already kind of low on the power rankings last week. They were number 7 for me, I think. Oh, 8. They were 8 for me. And with that performance, losing to Arizona, San Francisco, St. Louis, and Philadelphia, never taking any of those series in a tight playoff race, they're out of my top 10.
Yeah, and that was one of the teams that fell out of my top 10 as well. You know, again, you went over everything with them, but just, the way they've kind of, slacked off a little bit here, and knowing how some of the other teams performed, they fell out for me. I did have one other team that fell out of my top 10, which was the St. Louis Cardinals. It was as we will get into, it was a difficult decision on my 10th place spot. And if you would have told me, 3 or 4 weeks ago that I would have a top 10 at this point, that did not include the Cardinals, I would have called you crazy. But
can I call you crazy because you didn't put them in the top 10?
That is where we are right now. It's the crazy world of eMLB.
All right, so just a real quick blurb. Why'd you keep him out of the top 10?
You know, as we'll see, it came down for me with them and another team. And to be honest, it felt like the other team has just been on more of a roll lately. They've been pretty evenly matched, but through the month of August they were a better team, and seeing how some of the members of the Cardinals rotation have been a little bit up and down here lately, while this other team has kind of turned it on despite some challenges from their end. I just felt like I had to give them the nod. So yeah. It was a tough call, but that's the route I went.
Yeah, I mean, I'm obviously biased, but the Cardinals, the only month that was worse for the Cardinals was the month of June. June, they went 10-15. August, they went 13-14. So on the bright side, they ended the end of the month only losing one series. Since losing in this last sim, they only lost one series. They split a 2-game series with Houston, got swept by the Phillies, which was their loss, but then one series against the Mets and the Athletics. So I'm trying to take the positive into September, but honestly, I'm a little scared. Next week, you could very well see my team outside the top 10, and I just wouldn't be able to ignore it anymore. But getting into our actual top 10, my number 10 team is the team that swept the Cardinals and are on a hot streak lately in the Philadelphia Phillies. They have now jumped into the top spot in the NL East. They are the team that replaced the Mets on my top 10. They replaced the Mets in the standings, and they just had a very, very strong sim. Like I mentioned before, they swept the Cardinals in a 3-game series. They swept the White Sox in a 2-game series, and then took 2 out of 3 against both the Dodgers and the Mets. So they are playing some really good baseball right now. Let's see if they can keep this going. I mean, they're a team that's like they're not spectacular in any one area. They're just kind of around league average in everything, but they're finding ways to win ball games. And if you can figure out a way to win, that's what matters. I mean, who cares what your stats look like if you're winning games, right?
That's the key that's the name of the game.
Yeah. So what about your number 10?
So my number 10, again, kidding aside, it really did come down, almost to a flip of a coin between who to put at number 10 between the Cardinals and this team. But I did go with the Milwaukee Brewers at number 10. Throughout the month of August, they were 16-13. They've won 6 out of their last 10. Somehow they're only a game and a half back in the division. I really don't understand how this team has been able to do it, but they have. They've got an incredible home record, 42-27. So they're really doing well at home, and you got Nolan Arenado, who stuck it out there. Christian Yelich, who's been okay this year, but really the star there is Darius McKenzie, the shortstop. He's one of the real superstars of the National League, and he's really taken over that team as his own. And it's almost like he's willing them to stay in that NL Central race.
Yeah, and I'll make a quick comment on the Brewers because they were my first team out of my top 10. I'd say they are 11 for mine. The thing that scares me about them is how inconsistent they are. If you look at how their records went in the month of August, they're either on a winning streak of 3 or more games or a losing streak of 3 or more games, except for like back and forth in Cincinnati. And it's like, what's going on? So like for example, the last 3 in this last sim, the last 2 weeks, they won 3 straight, which included a back end of a Cincinnati, or 4 straight. Cincinnati, Chicago, then lost 4 straight, then won 6 straight. And it's like, all right, which team are you? Are you the team that's going to keep losing, or you're the team that's going to keep winning? So that's why I kept them just outside of my top 10, because I'm not seeing consistency. But I mean, hey, a 6-game winning streak is still pretty good, even if it does follow up a 4-game losing streak.
Yeah, it's very fair. Very fair.
All right, what's your number 9?
So at number 9, I did have the Phillies a little bit higher. I had them at number 9. Again, mostly for me, kind of on the strength of that 3-game sweep of the Cardinals and taking 2 or 3 from the Mets, and kind of leapfrogging back into that first place there in the NL East. They seem like they're on a little bit of a good run here. Again, they're in a way they're kind of like the Brewers, where if you look at their team, I mean, there really isn't a whole lot that stands out to you as what is making this team go. They've kind of gotten some solid production across the board, but really no one big guy that's kind of sticking out for them. It's just been kind of a team effort all season long.
Absolutely. And I've already said my piece about the Phillies, so I'll just jump into my number 9, and that's where I have my Cardinals, down 2 spots from last week. Honestly, on the verge of dropping out. Like, I'm going to be honest, I'm not happy with my team right now, outside of Jeremy Frank and Ronald Acuna. Acuna has been hitting great ever since he came to St. Louis, well above and beyond what he was doing in Atlanta at the time. The problem is no one else is stepping up to help him. There was a game where my top 2 or 3 guys got on base it was my top 2 guys in my lineup got on base 4 times each, and they didn't score a run at all. They each got on base 4 times, and they didn't score. And if you have an offense like that, you're not going to win any games. Like my series against the Mets, I won 2 out of 3. The scores of those games: 2-0 win, 2-0 win, 3-1 loss. You need the offense to do something. They are not getting it done, and it's frustrating the heck out of me. I was hoping Anthony Rizzo, claimed off of waivers from Pittsburgh, would give a spark, but he's hitting under 200 right now. So he hasn't been the spark I was hoping for. I mean, outside of Aguilera and Acuna, maybe a little bit of Rendon and Henderson, no one's really stepping up offensively. And if we're going to make the playoffs, we need someone to step up, because the pitching staff, they've started the games I had big offense were the games where the pitching couldn't hold it together. And like I lost a couple of high scoring games, and it was like, okay, of course, when my pitching starts blowing up is when my offense finally starts doing something, but I still lose. So if we have another sim like this one, I mean, to be fair, we won more than we lost this sim, but getting swept by the Phillies really hurt. Really, really hurt, because that was the opportunity to take over the lead in the division from the Cubs, because that same weekend the Cubs were playing Colorado and lost 2 out of 3.
Right.
And if I had taken just 1 game out of that series, we'd have a tie at the top of the division right now. It's just someone's got to step up, and Acuna's trying, Aguilera's trying. The rest of the team, someone's got to do something. So that's my number 9, and I'll stop ranting about my team.
Well, and before we move on, just one thing, and again, I understand the frustration you have, because I'll be honest with you, if you told me as a GM I can pick any roster of any NL team to have as my own, I would pick the Cardinals roster.
Oh, really?
I mean that's the roster that I would take to try to win. Right now. I mean,
really?
Not to talk about, for the future and all this. I mean, that's kind of a different ball game. But if you told me, which of these rosters would you want for a season for right now, I would pick the Cardinals roster.
You would pick them over San Diego or Washington?
Yeah, absolutely.
Really? I'm honestly surprised there, because San Diego's, I mean, spoiler alert for our power rankings, they're both of our top NL teams. Like they're the NL team that's the highest on this list. So I'm actually surprised that you say that. Like, and the frustrating part is that the players, like, I'm specifically thinking of one player that is severely underperforming compared to last year, and that is Joe Adell. Joe Adell, I signed him to a lucrative contract extension for 7 years because of how much he broke out in his first season at St. Louis, and he's fallen off a cliff this season, and I just don't know what happened.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. Like, if you just looked at pure talent of the roster, regardless of of how they're performing this season. For me, that's the roster I would pick talent wise.
Yeah, I mean that's fair. Like Adele and Flaherty are two key players that are underperforming their on paper attributes.
Yeah.
So that's fair. All right, so we'll stop talking about my team because I know people are sick of just hearing me talk about mine. I mean, I'll talk about stuff I know, and I know my team better than any other team. So, sorry. My number 8 is Chicago. They are not doing much better than the Cardinals right now. Honestly, they are pretty much doing the same as the Cardinals did. In fact, they lost 3 out of their 4 series this sim. The problem is the Cardinals couldn't take advantage. One of those series, now to be fair, 2 of those series were against Milwaukee, whom we mentioned is on fire, and San Diego, the top team in the NL. So you have to give them some credit there. But they did lose 2 out of 3 to Colorado, which is a team that's definitely on the bottom half of the league. They had a big chance to pull away, and they didn't capitalize. The Cardinals struggled. They got swept by Philadelphia. Just like the Cardinals could have taken the opportunity to jump the Cubs could have had the opportunity to extend their lead further. Neither team seized the opportunity, so that's why I've got the Cubs dropping down to number 8.
And this was a spot where I could have gone either way, with a couple of teams. But for me, at the number 8 spot, I put the Rays, and a little bit in a similar vein to what you were talking about with the Cubs. For me, it was, they went through a spell here kind of, before getting a win on the last day of the sim. They had lost 5 games in a row, and 3 of those 4 were against the Red Sox, a team they're competing against there in that division. Lost 2 of 3 to the Astros. Before that, they did win 2 out of 3 against Texas, but right before that, they lost 2 out of 3 to the Padres. So, they've been going through a rut. And again, they're without Fritz Flaherty, one of their key players, maybe, in a way, their most valuable player, the guy who kind of kickstarts their lineup, from the top of the order. But, I really thought by this point in the season, and we could go back to one of our podcasts from a while ago, and I thought, for sure that the Rays were going to overtake Boston, who was in first place at that point, by the end of the season and win the division. And they just really haven't kicked it into high gear the second half like I thought maybe they would. So, they're still a very solid team, still have, a very high likelihood of getting into the playoffs as a wild card. But I really can't see them at this point now, doing enough to win the division like I thought they would.
All right, so what do you got at number 7 then? Because I'm going to hold my comments on the Rays because I'll talk about them in a minute.
Yeah, so for number 7 again, I had the Cubs there. So I kind of went back and forth about which one to include there, but really it was the Rays. Kind of that 5-game losing streak is what caused me to put them at 8 instead of the Cubs. But the Cubs again, kind of like you mentioned, we felt like kind of on our last rankings that they were really ascending. That they maybe were on their way, not only to be in the top team in the NL, but maybe to kind of break into some of that, AL grouping that we've kind of had at the top of the rankings here. But, they definitely took a step back here a little bit. Again, we touched on where they had a couple injuries in the rotation. You don't know if maybe that, finally had a little bit of an effect there, with them, kind of dropping a few games there, losing 2 out of 3 to a couple of different teams, and, including the Brewers and the Padres. Again, I still think that roster is really talented with a lot of young guys, but hey, maybe the playoff race pressure is getting to some of those guys. They're still untested. I mean, as talented as they are, a lot of those guys are rookies or very young players.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've already kind of made my comments on the Cubs, but I mean, the challenge is going to be Cubs, Cardinals, and Brewers all play each other 6 times within the last month of the season. So it's going to be some interesting baseball to watch. So we kind of flip teams here in the middle with the 7 and 8. I put the Rays at number 7. One of the main reasons, and again, this is like you could go either way at this spot, 7 and 8. We both had a tough time deciding our order here. The reason why I had the Rays above the Cubs, honestly, because they had such similar sims, it was more of the fact that I had the Rays ranked above the Cubs the last time. and I felt like they kind of performed the same. Yeah, the losing streak looks bad on the Rays, but you also have to think at the beginning of the month they had a 5-game winning streak, which kind of counteracts it a little bit. And also they're playing against a tough team in the Red Sox, whereas the Cubs were not playing as stiff a competition when they were going on their on the losing side. I mean, with like losing to Colorado, I mean, yeah, they lost to the Padres and Milwaukee, who are on the upswing right now, but I don't know. You could go either way here. But yeah, I'm surprised like you that the Rays haven't secured that top spot yet, because they've been playoff teams for multiple back-to-back seasons, been in the World Series, and just have to wonder if that spark's going to come back from their previous seasons that they've had.
Mm-hmm.
Number 6 for me are the Boston Red Sox, jumping up 4 spots actually from my last time. I know last week I think you had Boston ranked even higher than this because you had confidence in them, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I think I had them maybe 5, 4 or 5, something like that.
I think you did have them 5. We'll see in a second when we see how far they move up on yours, because we haven't talked about where you have them ranked yet. But Boston put on a pretty good show. Like we've already mentioned, they took 3 out of 4 from their division rivals, Tampa Bay Rays. But also in this sim, they took series against. They split a 2-game series against Baltimore, which honestly at this point, with Baltimore playing the way they do, you'll take that as a win. And then they took 2 out of 3 from division leading Detroit. So they had strong series against 3 playoff contending teams. But I put them at 6 because they kind of crapped the bed. Got swept at Kansas City. Like, what the heck happened? You play such strong baseball against Baltimore, Detroit, and Tampa Bay. I guess they just used up all their energy at the end of the month. I don't know.
Yeah, and they actually took 3 out of 4 from both Tampa Bay and Detroit. I mean,
that's right. I missed that game. Yeah, that was 3 out of 4 in Detroit.
So I mean, you take 3 out of 4 each from both of those teams, and then you turn around and then you drop 3 in a row to Kansas City, who I know has been playing well, but that was a little bit of a head scratcher for me. And that I have them at 6 also. We can go ahead and mention that. I have them at 6 there, kind of for the same reason, is that they had a hot stretch there, and it seemed like, all right, they're once again, when we kind of start counting them out, they're gonna do something, and then they lose that, get swept there by Kansas City. They picked up, obviously we talked about them getting Noah Syndergaard at the deadline. Again, he hasn't performed all that great. I think he's got close to a 5 ERA through 6 starts. So not necessarily coming in and being kind of the linchpin of that rotation like maybe they thought he would be. Some of the offense, some of those guys are kind of a guy like James LeBlanc, hat tip commish. At second base, his numbers are kind of coming a little bit back to the mean. He had for a while there, his batting average was 350, 360, and you kind of knew that wasn't going to hold up over the whole course of a season. So some of those offensive numbers are coming back to earth a little bit. And I think that's played a role for them also.
I mean, he's still getting on base over 40% of the time. So.
Oh yeah, still having a phenomenal season. Just at a certain point, the back of the baseball card numbers pop up.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so we've got. So what we did confirm, you did have the Red Sox at number 5, so they did move down 1 spot for you. For me, they moved up 4 spots because I wasn't sold on them at the time. They've convinced me. They played really well. Next time, beat Kansas City at least once, though. Come on.
Right.
All right, top 5 time. Who you got?
So number 5, I've got the Padres, who I'll be honest, I was tempted to have them up higher than this. I mean, they've been playing really well. It's just again, like we've talked about that American League, there's so many good teams there. It was just I couldn't find a way to get them any higher than 5. But they've won 8 out of their last 10. They took 2 out of 3 from the Cubs, D-backs, and Rays, and over this last stretch here. So
3 out of 4 from D-backs.
Oh, 3 out of 4 from D-backs. Yes. So again, they've won these series pretty convincingly against some really top teams. As they've continued to keep a stranglehold on that division. The one thing we talked earlier about some of the Cubs injuries in the starting rotation. The Padres did get some bad news here recently. One of their starters, Francisco Morales, they found bone chips in his elbow, and he's essentially gone for the year. He's out 2 to 3 months. So sort of like the Cubs, there's a team here that's going to lose one of the members of their starting rotation, and it won't affect them for the division unless something really, really crazy happens. And maybe he wasn't really factored in as a starter for the postseason, but that is one quality arm that they're not going to have the rest of the year.
Yeah, and the player that's stepping up into that role is Nick Marcovicious, who honestly looked pretty good his first start of the season. He's been in the bullpen role up until now, but he threw 7 1/3 scoreless innings in his first start with a 7-1 win over Miami. So if he can keep that up, they won't really miss. Oh gosh, what was his name? Morales that much. But again, that's just one game. You can't base everything off just one game. So we'll see how that goes. But I have also got San Diego at number 5. They put a really strong stretch of games together here at the end of August, like you already mentioned. Their two blips on their two blemishes in August were getting swept by Milwaukee and getting swept by the Mets at the beginning and the middle of the month. But they turned that around in great fashion with taking series, like you mentioned, against Tampa Bay, Arizona, Chicago, and sweeping Miami. So they are setting themselves up for a comfortable lead in the AL West. Diamondbacks are not out of it yet, but they took 3 out of 4 from the Diamondbacks. Diamondbacks could have been a lot closer than this if not for that series. So they do play the Diamondbacks 6 more times, 6 more games against Diamondbacks as we end the season. So Diamondbacks are going to try to look to get revenge there. But with a bunch of games against Colorado and San Francisco and LA coming up for the end of the season, you have to think San Diego's got one of the easier schedules to end the season, with Colorado, San Francisco, and LA kind of not performing the greatest. So San Diego might cruise to the playoffs just based on that alone, even if they do lose a couple series to the Diamondbacks. And at number 4, and we've already mentioned that San Diego was our top-ranked NL team on both of our lists. So, surprise, surprise, the top 4 teams are all AL teams here. Number 4, I've got the LA Angels. We mentioned that they are playing some pretty good baseball right now, despite the fact that they don't have Mike Trout in their lineup. And that is pretty darn impressive. They went on a 9-game winning streak in the middle of the sim, where they took the last 3 of a 4-game series against Seattle and then swept New York and Toronto. To be fair, and this is the reason why they're at number 4 for me, New York and Toronto are not stiff competition. They are both near the bottom of their division, near the bottom of the league. So, okay, yes, they did sweep both of the series. They didn't lose any game between them, but it's not like they're sweeping high-level competition. So while they are definitely playing well, they are now only a half game out of that top spot in the AL West. I have to give them a slight knock for that level of competition, because then they followed that up by losing 2 out of 3 to Detroit, which they had a chance to make another statement against a division leader. Fell just a little short. At least they didn't get swept by Detroit, but they did lose 2 out of 3 there.
Yeah, and I actually have the Angels at the 4th spot too. Again, it was a little bit of a toss-up there between them and another team. They're kind of in the 3 and 4 spot, but I did put the Angels there at 4 for a lot of reasons you mentioned. And the thing for Tom and his Angels, you mentioned that 9-game stretch, kind of against some of the apologies, but bottom feeders of the American League. I'm a bottom feeder in the National League, so I can say that.
Yeah,
so,
I'm not allowed to use that term.
Yeah,
only we're allowed to use that phrase.
And speaking of that, what I was getting to is that now they're getting ready to go on another stretch here of 9 games where they're facing me, the Reds, bottom feeder in the NL, and then 3 more games against the Mariners and 3 more games against the Oakland A's. So again, that's the next 9 games for them. I don't know. It could be another 9-game winning streak. It could be even going 7-2 there. That could be a big stretch, and that leads into a middle of September test with the Rangers. So they got 6 more games against the Rangers ahead, and that could give them a lot of momentum heading into that next big showdown series with Texas.
Absolutely. All right. So, what was the team that you were kind of going back and forth on between three and four?
Yeah, so I've got the Tigers at number three. They have the same record as the Angels. Haven't been quite as hot lately as the Angels, but and you mentioned this when you were talking about LA. The Tigers did just take 2 out of 3 from them, and quite frankly, when you're down to splitting hairs, a recent series like that for me was enough to put Detroit just a notch above there. Again, I mentioned to you that if I had my pick of rosters in the National League, I would pick the Cardinals. If I had my pick of rosters in the American League, I would pick the Tigers.
Oh wow.
So,
Okay.
even though I have them at number three, I still think talent-wise, this is the most talented team in the American League. I still think they're that team that I would look at as the favorite as they head toward the postseason, and have been performing well and that running away with that AL Central. Now again, as we look ahead at their schedule, they've got some games still left with Baltimore. They've got some. Other than that, though, they really have a lot of division games with teams they've dominated. So they could really make a run here in September, and as they get ready for postseason potentially.
All right. That's fair. Great arguments, but actually, I don't have Detroit at number three. I've got Texas at number three. And the reason why I have Texas at number three is kind of the same reason I have Angels at four and not higher with both of these AL West teams, is that they both did really well against teams that are near the bottom of the league. The Rangers in this last sim swept Oakland and swept a 4-game set against Cleveland, two of the bottom teams in the league. And their other series, that sim, they lost 2 out of 3 against Tampa Bay and then split a 2-game series against your Reds. So nothing really impressive here. So that's why I had them ranked third last week. I didn't move them at all. They had a really strong month outside of getting swept by Baltimore at the beginning of the month. So they're still definitely one of the top teams in the league, but the Angels are slowly creeping up on them, and it's a good thing that they're sweeping these lower level teams, because they didn't do the best against the other teams in this M. Now it was Tampa Bay. They're a pretty good team. So we'll see how Texas does down the stretch. They've got a bunch of actually looking at their September and October, the rest of the season, there is literally one series where they're not playing a team that's their division. And that's Milwaukee at the end of the month. Literally every series from here on out, besides that Milwaukee series at the end of September, is a series against. Oh no, never mind. They finished the season against Tampa Bay. I forgot to flip to October. So their last 2 series actually of the season will be against teams that aren't in their division. Up until then, they need to win the division before they get to those series, because they don't want to have to rely on other teams to beat their interdivision rivals. So we'll see. But I actually have Detroit at number 2, staying in the same spot I had them in last week. And all of your points are very valid. I think they are a really good roster. I don't think that would be my roster that I would choose to have a season of in the AL. And we haven't touched on what team that would be. It's spoiler. It's my number 1 team. That's the roster I would want, but we'll get to that in a second. But with Detroit, they had a little bit of they had a fairly strong last sim. Their blemish being losing 3 out of 4 to Boston, but they swept Minnesota. They took 2 out of 3 from LA, and they took 2 out of 3 from Kansas City. And when a majority of your series are wins, you're on the right track. And for me, they're maintaining. They're setting themselves up for that playoff run. They don't have to look too worriedly in the rearview mirror, because Kansas City's way too far behind them. And they're just going to keep, as long as they keep winning series, they don't have to sweep people. As long as they just win 2 out of 3 every time, they're good to go.
Yeah, very, very well said. For me, I do have the Rangers at number 2, so I have those flip flopped a little bit from what you had on the 2 and 3 spots. For me, it came down just a little bit. Again, we're kind of splitting hairs at this point in the process. Coin flip, yeah. But they had just a hair better record than the Tigers. They a little bit better over their last 10, 7-3. And I just love the way that Jamie has put this roster together. It's been a solid team all season long. Again, they're in a tough division, so they've been in a battle the whole way through, back and forth a little bit with first the kind of the 3-team race with them and the Astros and Angels, and kind of turn into a little bit more of a 2-horse race with them and the Angels. But this team, there really aren't any weaknesses with this squad. I mean, they've got a lineup that we've always joked about, the running Rangers. They've got a ton of team speed. A lot of really solid hitters. Kind of up and down that lineup. Solid pitching. They lost DeMarcus Evans at the back end of their bullpen a while ago, but that hasn't really seemed to hurt them much from that perspective. And they've just been a real strong, consistent team all season long.
Very, very well said. Although I'm gonna accuse you of a little bit of bias, considering your CCP is their starting shortstop.
and he loves Texas. As much as I would love to have him back in Cincinnati to play shortstop or third base. The kid loves Texas, and I don't know what plans Jamie has for him for the future, but I think he'd love to be a Ranger for life.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. They definitely, and the scary thing about Texas is that their superstar players like Volpe, Abrams, Cage, Merriman, all of them are 24 or younger.
Yeah,
that's scary.
That's why I say I love what he's built there, and it's built to be sustainable for a long time.
Absolutely, but no surprise, both of us at the number one spot. The roster I would take if I wanted them for a season, the Baltimore Orioles. No surprise here, 79-51, 2 games or 2.5 games above the second best record in baseball, Texas Rangers, and they just keep on going with that combination. The combination of having they have 2 fantastic 1-2 punches, and those are the 2 aces that we talked about earlier in Ethan Knight and Jim Reed. But then they also have the 1-2 punch at the top of their lineup, how we mentioned in the last podcast, get on base, each of them over 40% of the time, with Michael Busch and Alex Verdugo. So those 2 separate 1-2 punches, when you have them on both sides of the ball, it's hard to beat. Like they just keep winning. This last sim, they didn't lose a series at all. Now, they didn't sweep anyone, but they also didn't lose a series. And when you win every series, you're going to be a playoff team, guaranteed.
Yeah, and again, you mentioned that 1-2 punch in the rotation. I mean, for 40% of your games, you are a heavy favorite, no matter who you're playing. I mean, that is an incredible advantage to have. When you also have plenty of other pieces around them. It's not like they have a team with these 2 aces and then they're trying to scrounge together runs or anything. I mean, they have some really solid bats. At the beginning of the season, we all kind of pointed to Alex Verdugo, I think, as an X factor for this team. Would he be able to give them that extra bat to go along with Buster Bluth and Nick Spence and really help that offense to step up, knowing that the pitching staff was supposed to be a strength. And he has. I mean, he's been incredible. He's been, really great at the top of that lineup. And, Brendan, again, has put together a team here that, is just looking like it's going to stay strong. Sometimes you go through a long winning streak like they had, and that just catapults you for the remainder of the season. And you just ride a wave all the way after that, and it's looking like that's kind of the wave they're on right now.
Yeah, this is a very strong consideration to be the number 1 seed in the entire playoffs. This is the team that I'm looking at to potentially have the best record in baseball, and they don't look like they're slowing down. Not only that, so we talked about the 1-2 punch in the rotation. They also have a number 3 spot in the rotation that could be a 1 or a 2 in a lot of other teams, and that's Connor Siebold. He is he's putting up fantastic numbers in the 3 spot as well. So and they still have this listed as a 6-man rotation, which I still find crazy, but it's working. I mean,
Yeah,
why stop it?
And I guess if you look at it from one perspective, if that helps save some wear and tear on, a Jim Reed and an Ethan Knight and potentially a Connor Siebold, where you can just ride those horses in the postseason and really squeeze out as much as possible in those playoff series, then hey, maybe that's a strategy that he's thought of that is really going to turn and pay off for him.
Maybe we'll see. It seems to be whatever it is, it's working right now.
Yeah, whatever you're doing, everybody stay where you're at and don't move.
Unless you got to go field the ball. Sorry, that was a really, really bad joke. I can't believe I'm going to end the power rankings on that. My bad. I'm sorry, everyone. That was horrible. All right.
That was better than my flash in the pan joke.
I guess I missed that one.
Yeah, you didn't react to that. I wasn't gonna bring it up at that.
Maybe
point,
it's just a joke that's so sophisticated it's over my head. I don't know. Anyway, thank you guys for sticking with us through our craziness and our sporadic thoughts here and there. We do a little bit of planning. It's not like we have a script that we hold to.
Yeah, come on.
Oh man. All right. Well, there you go. There you have it. There are power rankings. No surprise with the top team, Baltimore. Definitely some mixed up in between though, as the records get a little bit more spread out than we had last time. We'll see what the next sim has, the next 2 weeks of sim have in store as we chug through September and playoff baseball. But thank you guys once again for joining us. We absolutely love doing these again, and I do apologize for me complaining about my team so much. I know there's other GMs across the league that have way more reason to complain than I do, namely Cody. I am so sorry about how your Pittsburgh Pirates are performing this season. I do not understand what's going on there. I was looking forward, like I with the way that the rest of the NL Central is performing, you could have had a 4-team race, and that would have been fantastic. But man, they're like them and like LA Dodgers and what's another team that's Chicago with their strong start has faded really, have fallen off a cliff. Like, I do apologize for how much I complain. I really shouldn't. This is a lot of fun. I do have fun with this as much as I say I'm frustrated with my team, but this is a whole lot of fun. I wouldn't trade it for the world, and I hope you all feel the same. Any other last thoughts, Jar, before we sign off for the night?
Not really. I'm excited to see what this next month holds, and be interesting to see when we check back in next week to see what changes have happened.
I can't wait to start seeing some of these playoff series once we actually get to it as well, because those streams are going to be some really exciting and intense streams with how close all of these teams are. Imagine how good baseball we're going to have once we hit the playoffs. So looking forward to that. We will be back next week with another podcast. We have a couple of interviews lined up as well, including interviews hopefully soon with a couple of our playoff contending teams that are ready to trash talk each other, apparently. So hopefully we'll get them set up for an interview as well. But thank you guys so much for joining us on this episode of the eMLB Insider Podcast, and we will see you next time. Take care.